Welcome back to the Hoopball Fantasy pregame show, our first of the second half of the season, and it's an incredibly exciting one today. We are joined by our special guest here. He is the Detroit Pistons beat writer for the Detroit News, and frankly, just a Michigan sports media coverage just staple in the area. Rod Beard, how are you doing, man? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We are, glad we were able to get you on a day off. I know that those come probably coming less frequently with the second half of the schedule, just all condensed together. It's going to be sort of a mad dash to the end. But we appreciate you taking the time to hop on today and talk some basketball with us.
No, it's all basketball all the time. And until the season is over, then every day is a work day. There really are no off days, but we're making it work.
Yeah, well, as we all are. I mean, again, when you're just talking about stuff that you love, it's not work. It's all
not work at all. There you go.
Yeah.
You got
it. So if you are all tuning in for the first time or you're returning to the show, as you all know, we basically go through each game on the card for a particular day. Friday, we got 7 games, and Rod and I are going to go through each of them and cover just, the main fantasy basketball points that we're just keeping tabs on. But before we dive into that, I mean, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little Pistons with, someone such as yourself who is as plugged in. And they're a fascinating team. I mean, they we all know what it is like, from a real life perspective. This is a team that has got their eyes set on the future. But in terms of fantasy basketball, there's a lot of different interesting guys here, especially as we get closer towards the end of the year and some vets are maybe moved out, or just some younger guys get an extra opportunity. So we're just going to dive into a couple topics, if you just highlighting some of the interesting things we're watching out here. And I wanted to start just by talking about kind of like the big general aspect of this team is that I feel that while we all sort of knew what was going to happen on a grand scale, I think that the talent on this roster was kind of underestimated from the beginning. And there's no one more emblematic of that than Jeremy Grant, who bet on himself this offseason. The Detroit Pistons, Troy Weaver and Coach Dwayne Casey, they bet big on him, brought him in to be this number one option, and he's blossomed in a way that we've never seen from him before. I mean, what has it been like covering his just ascension into this reliable offensive creator?
Yeah, in the offseason when we agreed to the contract, it was sort of, well, 20 mil is what you might pay for a frontline starter, but how good is he going to be? And he's lived up completely to the billing, averaging about 24 points. But it's also the shot creation and the usage that he's gotten that he can fill a stat sheet. He doesn't rebound as much as you'd probably like from a guy who's playing power forward, but he scores enough and he can score from 3. He gets to the free throw line quite a bit. And that mid-range game is going to keep him. That's a fair staple. So all of those things make him somebody that you just want to keep an eye on. And then defensively, he can guard the other team's best wing. He can guard a 2, a 3, a 4, even a small ball 5. So he's versatile enough on both ends where he becomes a valuable piece that you want to keep on the court at all times.
Yeah, and he's just, I mean, it's incredible that he's just had all these other tools to his game than we all saw. I mean, we all knew that he had the 3-point shot and he had that shot blocking upside. But it's just, he's setting other guys up. That mid-range shot, like you mentioned, it's been an interesting element that he's added. He's been very versatile. And adding to that point about how I think people underestimated what he was going to bring to the table, like from a fantasy basketball perspective, depending on what ranking sites you're looking at, they're putting him inside like the top 40 players on the season. Mm-hmm. And he's, in most fantasy basketball drafts, he was being taken in pick 90 in the 100 range. He's been one of the best steals of the draft season this year, and it's just that essentially. I think he's here to stay, at least in that range. Which I'm curious for your thoughts. How do you view his role in the organization going forward? Because obviously they're rebuilding. They're going to be adding new players through draft, and maybe you could be making some deals to bring younger guys in. Do you think that this offense is going to be very Jeremy Grant centric moving forward? I mean, it's hard to tell until we know who the picks are, but I mean, how do you view his role here?
Yeah, I think they look at him as being the centerpiece and the foundational piece for their rebuild, given that kind of valuable contract and a reasonable contract, that if they have some modicum of success and they're able to continue to build the way that they're going, that he would be willing to re-sign, I think, too, for another couple of years after that. So when you start looking at the pieces that are coming together, and he's at the center of that, if he signs something, I wouldn't say a max deal necessarily, but if he signs for $25 million next time or $30 million, you still feel like that's within the range of where he would be. And these young guys, the key to the whole rebuild is your Sadiq Beys, your Killian Hayes. Those guys are going to be on rookie deals, so you don't have to pay them for another 4 or 5 years. And in the meanwhile, you can rebuild and figure out the other pieces around them. So guys like Josh Jackson, those guys, they're just trying to see what's there, what they can fit around Jeremy Grant. But he's going to be the horse. He's going to be the main guy that's going to be the offensive hub. And then defensively, as I said, they can build around him. And that was the funny thing at the start of the season. I was looking at what his fantasy value was on a nightly basis, and it was something like 6,000-7,000. I'm like, geez, this dude is he's going to be at 10,000 soon enough, because he can give you 35, 40 points a game. But before the season, he had never scored 30. So that was the key, that seeing that where that adjustment was going to be between what his fantasy price was going to be and then what that production was going to be.
Yeah, and I was rolling some DFS lineups out at the beginning of the year, and he was in almost all of them. I mean, he just
smart man.
It was evident when you just turned on the game. It's like, oh, he's going to do everything out there. He's going to play a ton, and he is going to be the guy on offense. And more than that, he's capable. It's been really fascinating to watch him, and that deal that Troy Weaver signed him to looks better by the day.
Yeah, and you get a package deal with sort of him and Mason Plumlee, and Plumlee has 2 triple doubles this year. There's another guy that you just didn't think was going to do anything like that, but in this system and with the playing time they're getting, you can see that they're a good pairing together.
Yeah, no, the Mason Plumlee signing's also been honestly pretty underrated. I think he's been more than serviceable as a starting center, and it'll be, we'll touch on him a little bit towards the end here, but he's another guy who has been killer for fantasy teams this year.
Yeah.
I want to shift the focus now to the point guard rotation, because there's a lot of different elements to watch out for this Pistons team in terms of how they're going to close out the season. But the point guard rotation, I'd say, is probably the most muddled. You have Killian Hayes, the 6th overall pick, who started the year off a little shaky, and he's been out ever since with that hip issue. And I believe I saw something that he's going to be reevaluated next week.
He could be back as soon as next week, they're saying.
And that would create a ton of interesting questions there, because obviously they have a ton of incentive to play him. They want to see what they have in him. They want to, give him reps in his rookie year. And I'm curious how you view that dynamic going forward, particularly with a guy like Delon Wright, who has been the starter for, I'd say, about the last month and a half or so. He and Hayes started the year as the 1 and 2 guards together. But, as Wright's really thrived playing point most of the time. In fact, he's even come out and said that that's his preferred position on the floor. He likes to be the facilitator. So how do you view that dynamic once we get to that point?
Well, the key to this is that Dwayne Casey likes having multiple ball handlers on the floor. And the reason that they went out and got Wright is that he's more of a combo guard, and he can play 1 or 2. If you need him to play someone in a pinch, and obviously they got in a pinch once Hayes got injured, then he can do that and do that pretty effectively. But Hayes is your future. That's your guy that you went out and spent a top 10 pick on this year. So that's unquestionably the future, and they're still very high on him. Wright is still going to fit in there, and probably because at that 2-guard spot, you've got Svi Mykhailiuk and Wayne Ellington. So it's nobody that can't move over so that Wright could start, and to make Hayes' transition a little bit easier and to do some of that ball handling so that Hayes can really focus on what his strengths are going to be. So I think that's going forward the rest of this year is probably what it's going to be, unless you get Delon Wright in a trade situation where a team is willing to give up a good package for him. Then you could see Dennis Smith Jr. shift over and be that backup point guard. But, I mean, between Dennis Smith and Saban Lee, that's the other side of this, that those guys have had an opportunity to play a little bit more, and they've shined. But now you got Killian coming back. So it presents kind of a dilemma of what's going on and how are you going to figure all this out. Was made a little bit simpler when Derrick Rose got traded, but that's where the point guard situation has been, is they've just got an overabundance of guys that have shown some promise and that they want to see a little bit more from. Yeah,
and it's just that this was going to kind of reach this point when Hayes returns, particularly when they traded for Dennis Smith, who I'm glad that you touched on there, because I'd be curious to see, he's had some pretty productive games recently, the triple-double game with Mason Plumlee a while back. And, he's had some fantasy value too in that stretch. It's been interesting to, I think Detroit's done a great job with reclamation type project players like Dennis Smith and Josh Jackson as well. Do you feel that players like that are going? I mean, obviously in the point guard situation, Hayes, no matter what, he gets priority. Do you feel that Josh Jackson is going to get maybe more extended looks as the year goes on, just by virtue of, again, wanting to see if they can get more out of him from his past vaunted status as this top 5 pick?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with him is they see his versatility on the defensive end too. And though he doesn't really start games, very often he finishes games because, again, he can guard one of the premier wings from the other team. So you've got Grant and Jackson out there at the same time, and you can shut some guys down and you can really cause some havoc with that. But again, it's going to take some more time. Jackson's got to get a little bit more comfortable. His three-point shot has been kind of on and off. And his turnovers and shot selection have been a little bit questionable at times this year. But overall, he's been kind of a B-plus guy from what the expectations were. I don't think they thought he would come in and be quite as good as he's been so quickly. And so with some of those other wings that they've got, Jackson has bubbled to the top, and he's playing 30, 32 minutes a game, even though it's in that reserve role.
Yeah, and it's been really, I mean, honestly, it's been exciting to see him tap into some of that defensive versatility while also, the 3-point shots hit or miss. But I think he's already exceeded expectations of what
sure.
a lot of people have had for him. And I feel like it's also kind of a good transition into what we're going to be watching for over the next couple of weeks in the lead up to the trade deadline. Obviously, Detroit is, we know what the big plan is going forward here. And they have some vets that are going to be some appealing to some contenders. Wayne Ellington, probably at the top of that list there. Not making any assumptions, but it seemed likely. How do you view Detroit's role at the deadline? Do you think that they're going to be aggressive in trying to churn out some assets with some of these veteran guys to make room for some of the younger ones?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the direction they're going to go. And if you looked at Troy Weaver in the offseason and saw what he did right before the draft and then in free agency, it was every other deal was a Detroit deal to bring in another guy to try to make salaries work and right-size the roster the way that they wanted to. I think at the deadline, they're going to look to try to shop Wayne Ellington because he's a vet minimum guy and another team can just take him on pretty easily. But again, it's going to be what's the return package that you're getting for Ellington. Maybe DeLon Wright's a guy that teams look at. Mason Plumlee could turn out to be somebody that the right team, if they don't get what they want, if the Lakers or the Nets or somebody like that can't find a serviceable center, maybe Plumlee becomes their target. And again, depends on what they're willing to give you for it. But that was the hidden piece of this roster construction is that you got contracts that are easily movable if you wanted to package them in a trade, is that Plumlee $8-9 million just isn't that big a deal if another team wants to take that on. So those are a couple of guys that I think teams will want to look at and to see, come knocking on the door and see what the Pistons want for those guys.
But you do have a sense that if Detroit doesn't feel like the return is strong enough, they could still, opt to keep some of these vets around and continue to sort of mentor these guys.
Yeah, I think in Ellington's case, though, they will find a deal that will work for them because it's only a 1-year vet minimum. So there's not a lot of value in keeping him around, especially if you can get a second-round pick or a player in a second-round pick, anything like that, they'd be very much interested in.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
So to sort of wrap this up here, I want to know if you were to pick one of these young guys on the squad that you think has the best chance at a second half leap, be it, in terms of just the rotation role, fantasy value, what have you, who would you be looking at?
I'll say Sadiq Bey is the big beneficiary of all this, and he's already moved into that starting role after Blake Griffin's departure. But other than that, I'll say Isaiah Stewart. He's going to have a good second half that he's starting to figure things out. He had a big three-pointer against the Hornets the other day, showing that range. So he's always been a hustle guy, a rebound guy. But that's a guy that I think as he moves in and maybe starts to play some power forward in addition to center, he's going to be more versatile and show more of his game.
Do you think that even if Mason Plumlee is on this roster past the trade deadline, do you still think that they'll look for ways to either play them together or even sort of move some of those center minutes around where Stewart maybe gets a larger role as time goes on?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the logical progression in this because they want to see what he has, and he can play small ball center. He can play small power forward if you want to go that way, or big power forward. So there's more to his game that he just hasn't been able to show just yet.
Yeah, and he's definitely been on the radar recently. I mean, like you mentioned, like he's flashed a little more range to his game, which is obviously an exciting element. In any respect, but the fantasy value has been starting to come for him. He's been teetering towards, top 130 player range, which for most of your guys in your leagues, that's pretty appealing for a young guy that has potential to grow into a larger role as time goes on. Yeah. So very fascinating stuff there, guys. Again, this is a team that they're going to have a lot of different moves to make in the coming days, coming weeks. And there's going to be fantasy value to be had there if you're on top of things when that moment strikes. So I hope that was helpful for y'all. Rod, thanks again for your insight on that stuff.
Sure.
Again, this is a really interesting team to look at. And y'all, if you appreciated that too, please you drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. We got more stuff on the horizon. But for that right there, I think I can't think of much more you could ask for than expert analysis from the man who covers the team himself. So please, all that stuff, all that good stuff. Anyway, that is let's dive into some general hoop stuff here. We got 7 games on the docket tonight. As y'all are aware, we're going to go through each of those games and highlight our main fantasy points that we're going to be taking a look at. So without further ado, we're just going to dive in. Our first game is the Philadelphia 76ers visiting the Washington Wizards. I will start on the Sixers side. We know that Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons have been dealing with health and safety protocols from their barbershop encounter at the All-Star break. And it appears that Embiid, I believe he's listed as probable for this one, so it looks like he is out of the woods on that, whereas Ben Simmons has been ruled out. So not going to look too much. Don't know what. Look into that as you would about what's going to happen going forward with those two. But if Embiid plays and Simmons sits, the main guy I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Matisse Thybulle, who he jumped into the starting lineup to replace Simmons in their last game. And the book on him is pretty clear. You give him starters minutes, he is going to rack up steals and blocks, and he'll hit some 3-pointers too. And that is all money in fantasy leagues. That is he does a lot of hard to get stuff at a really high rate. So, I think career high 5 steals in his last game out. If he's seeing 28 minutes again, I think he's a great guy to plug into your lineups as long as Simmons is out. And the fact that Embiid is cleared and Simmons hasn't been yet, I think that's a good indication that he might have a nice little stretch here. What about you, Rod? What do you think? What are you looking at on the Philadelphia side?
On the Sixers side, I just like Tobias Harris almost every night. I think he's on a different team. He could be your 1A scorer, and he could average 27 points a game if given that type of usage and given that type of green light. But I think his game just kind of gets pulled back a little bit more with the Sixers. But I like his all-around game and just what he's able to do. I think that can be valuable to guys if they're looking for something like that.
Yeah, totally. And he's honest, and he's had a revelation. He's had a great bounce back season playing more power forward, which I think is his best position in the NBA. We saw a little more small forward out of him when Horford was around last year. I think just being in his natural spot and being able to, just going downhill a lot more frequently, which Doc Rivers has made a point to reintroduce to his game. He's been as reliable as anybody, frankly. So let's jump onto the Wizards side of things. What are you looking at over there, Rod?
Yeah, I think Beal is listed as questionable. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to struggle offensively if they don't have him to sort of be the hub and try to get things done with. You can look at Westbrook, but at 10,000, a little bit over 10,000, that's a tough call for him to be carrying the whole load by himself. So I just don't like the Wizards without him. Maybe Bertans is a guy that you can kind of feel like he can have a breakout type of game at 4,500, but again, it's tough for them, and they're going to find a hard time trying to create any kind of offense for themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of my big takeaway too. It's just, Beal is, he's entrenched as the engine of this team, and Westbrook has had his ups and downs, but you figured that most of that usage is going to go towards him, just kind of be the Westbrook show. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what his, like you mentioned, so he's up to 10,000 now on, your DraftKings, your FanDuels. That's a lot. It's a lot. There might be better options tonight. But it's also worth considering Philadelphia, they're missing their best defender in Ben Simmons, but they're no slouch on the perimeter still with Thybulle, with Danny Green. They're going to probably just throw everything at them tonight.
Yeah, and the tough thing in games like this is that if it becomes a blowout quickly, then your starters for the Sixers aren't going to get the minutes they need to give you the numbers that you want. So I would just fade this game completely unless you feel like there's something that the Wizards are going to have and you feel like Beal is going to play. That's about the only way that you're going to get the full production out of your starters there.
You don't see a sneaky Garrison Matthews game here. Maybe he carries them.
There's a better option. There's got to be a better option somewhere else.
Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, yeah, that's going to be a wrap on that one. We'll just move on to our next game. It is the Denver Nuggets visiting the Memphis Grizzlies. Denver has got an ongoing scroll of an injury report. Paul Millsap, he is questionable with his after missing 10 games with a knee issue. JaMychal Green's questionable with his shoulder issue that he missed some time with. While Gary Harris is out with an adductor strain, and then RJ Hampton and Facundo Campazzo are both out with health and safety protocols. And really the main thing I'm watching, it's only contingent on whether Millsap and Green play. If they don't, then there's nothing I'm really watching on this team. It's sort of a 5-man operation with Jokic, Murray, Porter Jr., Monte Morris, and Will Barton. But if those two are back, I'm going to be interested to see what happens to Michael Porter Jr. because he's been playing a lot of power forward recently. And honestly, I think that's helped him sort of pick up the pieces of what's been a disjointed season for him so far. I feel that that's one of he's really good at that position. He's a great rebounder, and he's been able to jump his rebounding averages in this 10-game stretch up to 8.7, which is on the, previously before this mark where Millsap went down, he was only averaging 6 boards a game. That's a big difference in terms of if you've been relying on him for that category. So curious if Michael Malone still tries to find spots for him to get in at power forward, even if those two are back. But again, if they're not, then it's just gonna be more of the same there. What do you think on that side?
Yeah, I think the same way is that it's really hard to look at a Denver roster and say, hey, here's a guy who's going to have a breakout game. And we know Jokic and that stuff generally just gets spread around from game to game to game. But I think Denver's a tough team to gauge when you look at stuff like this. There's no sure thing that you say, hey, this guy's a little bit underrated. Or you just have to base it on matchup in this particular game.
Yeah, totally agreed. So Memphis side, what have you got for us there?
I like the Dillon Brooks play. He averages 27 fantasy points, and he's only 5,200 tonight. So I think that's those wings are defensively where you might get a little bit of a break against Denver. So it might be a place for Dillon Brooks to get some numbers there for you.
Yeah, I think. And it's going to be interesting to see how. Because I think Memphis has got all their bodies back tonight, except for Jaren Jackson Jr. Obviously.
Right.
It'd be really interesting to see. I think Dillon Brooks has still cemented himself, regardless, as like this 30-minute staple for both sides. What he can do on both sides of the ball, even if the shooting is hit or miss. I'm curious from a season-long fantasy perspective, what happens with DeAnthony Melton, who has this just varied. He can do so much on the floor, both in real life, and he fills the box score in terms of fantasy. And really what he needs to do is get over 20 minutes a game to return value, as we've seen in the past. But we've also seen that when Taylor Jenkins has got his full deck, he tends to be like the third guard behind Jason Allen and Desmond Bane. I don't know how much longer that can last, frankly, because every time I watch, I don't know what I'm missing here, but every time I watch Melton play, I see him either locking up the best perimeter option on the other team, or he's just making a smart read with his passing, reading the passing lanes, getting steals. He just does so much out there. I'm curious if he ever kind of breaks through.
Yeah, and with a coach with new young toys like that, like a Desmond Bane, you want to put him out there and race him as much as you can. Right. But again, it's going to be at somebody else's expense, and it might be Melton in this case. And
that has been the case so far. But anyway, we'll just move on to our next game on the docket. The Cleveland Cavaliers visiting the New Orleans Pelicans. Cleveland got some interesting stuff happening here. They have Larry Nance back in this game. It's confirmed. He missed basically all of February with a finger issue. Kevin Love, who's missed the whole season, essentially, he's listed as questionable. At least last I checked. I don't know if he's been.
Yeah, he's still questionable.
Yeah, so he's still. He might be coming back in this one. Darius Garland, he's nursing a left groin strain. He's listed as questionable, and Taurean Prince is out with a left shoulder issue. So basically, the main thing that we're watching is how is Cleveland going to organize this front court now, which has been a question for like 2 years now, and they've done some good jobs thinning it out. Like Andre Drummond, he's on his way out. I think we can reliably believe it's going to be Jared Allen, it's going to be Kevin Love, and Larry Nance taking on the majority of the power forward and center minutes. The question is, but the question is, are those three just going to be taking away from each other? Is there going to be how are they going to organize these guys in a way where they're all getting enough minutes to not only just help the team win, but be productive as individuals? And I note that last year, towards the end of the season, when Kevin Love finally got healthy, they had Andre Drummond on the squad, and Larry Nance was also healthy too. Those three at the same time, they found a way to play all three of those guys at 30 minutes a game. A lot of that involved Nance playing some small forward and power forward, Kevin Love getting some center minutes. So the question will be, is that what we're going to see here again? Because if that's the case, where these guys are still finding 30 minutes at different spots on the floor, all three of them are going to have fantasy value, I would believe. What's your take on their front court situation?
The front court is just who's going to be the scorer there. That Allen's not known as a scorer. Love can be, depending on the situation, and Nance isn't necessarily that. That's not his go-to thing. And I think their salaries are just tough too to look at it with Allen at 8,600 and Nance is 5,400. So that's a little bit more doable. But again, you've got the Pelicans who have a very good front court that you're going against. I don't see where the offense comes from to make that legitimate, that you're looking at those and your mouth is watering and saying that you want a heaping bowl of those guys in the front court. I just don't see that.
Yeah, it'd be lukewarm if that. I mean, it's tough to. You're right. They're tough to rely on. They're going to be generating a ton of offense, presumably through Colin Sexton and Garland if he suits up too. It'd be interesting to see how, there's also the aspect of Kevin Love being shopped, no one's gotten to see him play healthy minutes at all. Cavs got out 8 games until the trade deadline. Maybe he gets a bump in opportunity to sort of showcase. I mean, everyone knows what kind of player Love is, but they don't know how healthy he is and how effective he can be at the moment. So I'm wondering if there'd be any lean or incentive for the Cavs to showcase him more as a result.
Yeah, I think they'll try to showcase him, but again, he's a professional. He's going to be interested in games, but how interested is he going to be? That early in the year they were a playoff caliber team, and they've fallen off a little bit. They can still be in that same mix, but they're not going to be a 6 seed or anything like that. So I think it's just going to be, can he be motivated to give you night in and night out up until the trade deadline, where another team, like I said, is salivating and wanting to go out and give you a nice return for him.
Yeah, so watch out for that one. I mean, obviously, if Love is out and Nance is in, Nance is in, he probably becomes a much more favorable play at 5,400, like you mentioned, because then he'd just be absorbing pretty much all those minutes. Conditioning shouldn't be an issue for him too, because it was only a finger thing. So probably
not a problem.
Probably good to go in tonight's game. So let's turn things over to the Pelicans side. What have you got for us?
Give me all the Zion I can get, just all of it. Given the front court stuff we just talked about, give me all the Zion stock. I'll take it, and the Ingram stock. In either way, I think those guys can score in so many different phases of the game, especially Ingram, that they can both just have a field day. But I like Zion a little bit more for the salaries. 9,100 for Williamson and 83 for Ingram, but Ingram, the better scorer and the better kind of stat box filler, I think he'll do a little bit more there. Yeah,
and I think all in on Zion. I mean, even if Nance is good to go from like a conditioning standpoint, there's just going to be a little bit of rust there in general anyhow.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Pelicans, they just need to just turn the keys fully into the Zion experience. I mean, shooting over, it's like high 60s at the rim or something like that. I mean, he's been insane over the last month, and it feels like he still has more levels to unlock.
And he just demands the ball in the paint, and when he gets it, he's effective enough with it. So I think that works.
Yeah, totally agreed. And then the other, honestly, we're not even going to talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kira Lewis. I mean, they're going to get minutes, but I don't think they're going to be all that productive in them with JJ Redick out of the lineup. So we'll move on to our next game. Is the Miami Heat visiting the Chicago Bulls. Miami side, Bam Adebayo has been ruled out with a knee issue, and Avery Bradley is also still out with a calf strain. He's been out for a while with that one. And pretty simple here. I mean, with Bam out, Olynyk is going to be the starting center. He's been terrific as the starting center. He's been very productive there. He's sort of working offensively in that Adebayo role where, he's capable of doing some playmaking himself too. We've seen a small uptick there. He's just, they're running sets for him to get open on the perimeter. really just all over the floor. So he continues to be a worthwhile stream, and I don't know what his pricing's at tonight, but he could be a worthwhile play as well against this Chicago Bulls team that's got they're still trying to figure out what they're doing in their front court too.
Yeah, and I like Duncan Robinson too as a play. I think he's a guy who finds a way in games like this that the Bulls have good wings, good defensive wings, but they're going to find sets that he'll be able to score pretty nicely.
Yeah, it's a good call there too. So what about Chicago? They got a lot of questions right now. Now that they have pretty much all their guys healthy.
Yeah, but they Zach LaVine is playing at a top tier level, and everything kind of rotates around him. He's a guy I'd give a good look to. That at 9,600 though, that's starting to get in that tough ass territory too. But I think it's worth it. I think he can give you something.
What are your thoughts on, Thad Young, when Markkanen and Carter were out? We saw him sort of jump into this playmaker role, small ball center role, Draymond-like really, where he unlocked a new level of his game. It's something that Billy Donovan has wanted out of this team from the onset. He talked about in the offseason how he wanted Carter to be more of a playmaker. He wanted to see guys moving the ball at different places on the floor, and Thad accomplished that to a successful degree. He's probably been Chicago's second best player this season. And we saw in their last game with Markkanen healthy and Otto Porter healthy and Carter Jr. healthy, he was only limited to about 17 minutes. How do you think they're going to balance that going forward?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be trial and error and find what works there, because they have so many options that if Porter really is on the trade market, that they might be able to get something back, and that opens up more opportunity for other guys. Which
might lend itself to maybe him getting a little more burn as he ramps himself back up to, again, that whole showcasing element. Just, hey, he's healthy, and here's what he can do for you now that he is.
Yeah, exactly.
So that'll be big stories to watch there. As far as if you have Thad Young on your fantasy team, I think you still got to hold on for a couple more games till we can sort of get a bigger picture on what his role is going to be with this front court rotation the way it is. I just think he's too important for them not to find some time on the floor in a meaningful way. So he's been
good. And in a playoff run, you need a guy like that who's going to break out for you and, again, provide some relief for Zach LaVine.
Absolutely. So, that's the big story there. Next game on the docket is the Orlando Magic visiting the San Antonio Spurs. Magic, another laundry list of an injury report. Aaron Gordon is out resting his ankle on the second night of a back-to-back. Evan Fournier is out with a left groin strain. Terrence Ross is out with a sore left knee, and James Ennis is out with a calf issue. So it's going to be Nick Vucevic, and that's it's going to be Nick Vucevic. Going to see some Dwayne Bacon shots as well now that Ross and Fournier are out. I mean, he has no problem letting it fly. He's going to have no one challenging him to let it fly. He's going to be see a lot of him on the perimeter. And I guess I'm not watching much from a season-long fantasy perspective. Do you have any guys that you're looking out for a DFS perspective?
Give me all of the Vooch that I can get.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you're talking Jakob Poeltl as the defender on him, I will take all the Vooch I can get. Give me a heaping helping of even at 10,009. I think that's actually no, that's not Vooch. Vooch is 10-3. So I think that's still worth it. He can give you 45, 50 fantasy points pretty easily on a night like tonight. So I think that works out really well for him.
Yeah, I think they have no choice but to run things through him. And he's proven that he's more than capable of not only anchoring the offense, in the paint, but, he's been a good playmaker for them too.
Right. He fills the stat sheet. It's not just points, not just rebounds. He can do some other things for you.
By the way, some news just breaking over here. We have word that Kevin Love will play in tonight's game. Darius Garland will not. So all those questions about their front court that we touched on before, we're about to start seeing in some capacity what that's going to look like. You figure Love is going to be on a minutes limit of some sort. They're not going to run him out, 30 minutes again and have him strain his calf, which is what happened the last time out. But yeah, just for those of you tuning in, just make sure to make note of that. So let's talk about the Spurs on that side. What are you looking at for them?
Just pain. With Aldridge out, it's going to be tough for them to try to generate it. And now with DeRozan out too, trying to generate offense is going to be a little bit more difficult. But I like Murray. I like Poeltl to try to do something. But again, I think they're going to have defensive troubles just trying to control Vooch and control the paint area.
Yeah, I think from a season long perspective, we're all still kind of watching Derek White. just as the starting two next to DeJounte Murray. We've just barely scratched the surface of what that looks like because of all of White's injuries so far this season. We're just waiting for for him to shake the rust off and get the shot falling again, because he showed us before he went out with health and safety protocols that he's capable of stuffing the stat sheet too. Bad shooting night last night out. Let's see if he can turn it around against an Orlando Magic team that's going to be sort of lacking on perimeter defenders in this game.
Yeah, season long, I like Keldon Johnson too, what he's been able to do this season and come out and show that he's a multifaceted guard too. And
there's more opportunity now that LaMarcus Aldridge is out, the picture for the time being. He and Rudy Gay are going to absorb more front court minutes. And if you're in a deeper league, I think Rudy Gay is also worth exploring as an end-of-bench guy who does a little bit of everything, doesn't hurt you anywhere, and most importantly, San Antonio's got the most games of any team left in the season, so he's going to be playing a ton. And if you're in a league where it's all about how many games you can get out of your guys, that makes him even more valuable. So he's another guy to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
So we only got 2 games left here. We're gonna jump into them in a sec here. If y'all are just tuning in, please drop a like on the video if you could, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. This is sort of the headliner of our games tonight. It's the Houston Rockets visiting the Utah Jazz, and the headliner really just comes out of Houston just barely getting a roster on the floor. And it's crazy, this injury report. They have Christian Wood is out. John Wall is out with a left knee. Oladipo's out with rest. Eric Gordon, news broke earlier today, he's out for the next month at least with a groin strain. Daniel House is out with a right knee issue. And even more strange, David Nwaba, who like a week ago was said to be probably out for 6 weeks with a wrist issue, he decided to get a second opinion, and that second opinion said, hey, no, you're questionable tonight. You could probably suit up.
Weird the way that works.
Yeah, right? It couldn't have come at a better time for him. He's fighting for his spot in this rotation as basically everyone else is on this team, because it's just a bunch of wings. It's you have Kevin Porter Jr. popping off last night. Everyone's jumping to add him on his teams. I'm sure he's going to get a ton of play in DFS tonight. I mean, you figure they're going to run him out there because he's a reclamation project. He's talented. He can run some point for them. That playmaking was not an aberration. That is a part of his game. Like, he is good at that. It's just going to be trying to figure out what this team looks like when they're healthy. As far as tonight goes, who would be your favorite targets from a DFS perspective?
For Houston, I don't know if there is one. I mean, it's just, if you're a live body, you got lungs and teeth, you can you can find some playing time out here. Yeah, I don't like any of the Houston guys. I would say Porter at 3,200 is valuable enough, and I think he's a guy who just didn't get a long enough time in Cleveland to show what he really is, and now with some opportunity, people are going to get, from a season-long perspective, a better glimpse at what his talent is and what that skill set is. But I think his value is going to continue to increase as we go along, because they're going to see he's a very, very talented guy. That's not the knock on him at all.
How do you view what do you feel about Jayshawn Tate, Sterling Brown, and Nwaba? Is there any of those three that you feel deserves the longest look?
Probably Nwaba. I mean, yeah. I think he's a good player, but just needs to find the right role in the right situation, and this may be it for him too.
And I think the other guy that's worth mentioning, I mean, because look, they've got 8 guys tonight, so this is a blowout-proof roster, because they can't throw in the bench unit if the game's out of hand. They are the bench unit. They're everything. So there's some guys that are going to be playing because they have no choice but to. The guy that's sort of interesting in this matchup, and he's going to have a tough time, but he's no doubt going to see minutes, is Justin Patton. Big man on the roster. He's had shown an interesting, versatile game. With the defensive stats, the 3-point shot is here and there, and he can rebound a little bit. Yeah. Gobert is a tough matchup for any big man, no less one who was in the G League of last month. But, I mean, he could be somewhat he's definitely an interesting streaming candidate for your season-long teams. Do you have any read on him in DFS, or are you're just going to stay away there too? I'm
just going to stay completely away. I can see this game being over in the first half, and yeah. Again, Utah's bench players getting a lot more of that time.
So let's talk about Utah. I mean, I've got really nothing on them from a season-long perspective. This is as cut and dry a team as you're going to find. They're always healthy, and their guys just generally play the same minutes that they're usually playing. So is there anyone that you're interested in tonight?
I mean, I think Jordan Clarkson is a guy who has shown that he can play at a very, very high level, probably the sixth man of the year. But how much of that do they continue to kind of throw out there? Because you want to stay as healthy as you can and maintain the record that they have. But how do you maintain that for the length of the season and still be fresh for the playoffs? I think is going to be the challenge.
Yeah, I agree. And there is something to be said too, especially with Utah's got the easiest schedule, strength of schedule wise the rest of the way. We might see just in general, just by the way the games pan out, you're just going to see more emphasis on these bench units against weaker competition, just to rest your guys. But just that's how the game script goes. Right,
and adding Ersan Ilyasova is going to help them too. Is just giving them another guy who has veteran experience, another 3-point shooter who you can play a different style of play with him on the court. He can be a small ball center if you really need him to. So those types of guys you just want to have, and you never know who you're going to play in the playoffs or what injuries might crop up. So you want to have as many of those options as possible.
In agreement on that one. So now we're just down to our last game on the night. The Indiana Pacers are visiting the Los Angeles Lakers. Pacers side, their injury report's about the same as usual, aside from the terrific news that we got today that Karis LeVert's going to make his Pacers debut tomorrow, not tonight. But tremendous story, just an incredible set of circumstances that they found that when they did because of his trade, the kidney cancer, and that he's playing is just nothing short of just one of the few bright spots on this on a season that has a lot of bad medical-based stories. That's a really strong one. So we'll be watching, as far as fantasy is concerned, we're going to be watching how he impacts their rotation guys, TJ McConnell, Jeremy Lamb, Doug McDermott. He could cut into all of their roles. Tonight, though, I think we're just going to see the same Pacers team that we always have.
Yeah, a strong, kind of hardworking team that they just grind. They just grind and play. Brogdon's as smart a point guard as you're going to see in the league and multifaceted as well. So I think that's the key to them is just really trying to maintain that and just make it to the playoffs and get in it and be able to win a round or two. I think that would be a good season for them.
Yeah, and tonight's matchup, in just looking at what they've got ahead of them here, the Lakers are going to be without Anthony Davis and Marc Gasol, all their size. Feels like they'd be favorable for Sabonis and Turner. Does that are you more inclined to look at those guys as options tonight as a result of that?
Yeah, I would look at Sabonis but again, even in LeBron's case, is that he can match up with a guy like Sabonis. He's not going to be outsized. So they have other defensive options there. But I'd take a look at Sabonis. I think that kind of works. And yeah, I think that's about the only one. I don't like Turner necessarily in this situation.
Yeah, I feel like Sabonis. Yeah, I feel like they're going to try and force that to have the Lakers sort of respond to his presence down low with that obvious sort of hole in their defensive coverage there. He can create a lot of issues for them if he's going up. LeBron can hang with him, but then you have to deal with Kuzma and Markieff Morris grabbing some of the other guys. And, Kuzma's been a better defender this season, but there's still a matchup there to exploit.
I think so too. And Montrezl Harrell is another guy who can step in and play some of those minutes for you too.
So on the Lakers side, is he sort of the main guy you'd be focused on tonight, or is there anyone in this team that you don't, or are you just sort of staying away here?
Yeah, I don't like this one for the Lakers either. Even though it's at home, something just doesn't smell right. It's that gut instinct sort of thing, but this just doesn't. This doesn't feel good.
They're already kind of a tough team to just kind of look at. It's all as all LeBron teams are. You expect most of the production to come out of him, and then one other guy carrying the offensive load. Yeah,
and you've got to be lucky on a night-to-night basis of figuring out who that guy is. Is it KCP one night? It could be Schroeder the next night. Could be Kuzma. And so you're just playing a shell game of trying to figure out where you want to go with it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement on that. And from a season-long perspective, even more clear. There's just nothing. What this team's bringing to the table.
Yeah, and they're just kind of sleepwalking until they get to the playoffs anyway, or at least until deep until the second half of the season. So none of this really matters to them. The positioning doesn't matter. The seeding doesn't matter. None of it really matters until you get down toward the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. This is officially the second half now, so we'll see what kind of intensity they're coming out with here. But that's going to do it for us, guys. That is our 7 games. Rod, again, I cannot thank you enough for spending some time with us here and giving us that insight that you provided on the Pistons. Guys, you should definitely check out his work. He is, you are constantly churning out you're reporting on this team. You are the beat writer for the Detroit News. And again, where can people follow you in your work?
On Twitter, it's at DET News Rod Beard, RODBEARD. And this was fun. I enjoy doing stuff like this.
It was, and it was great to have you on. And I mean, I hope we can do some more stuff like this in the future. And guys, I mean, if you appreciate what you've seen here today, subscribe to the channel. We are going to continue to churn out stuff like this going forward. And follow Hoopball on Twitter at Hoopball Fantasy for the breaking news stuff and all of the the fantasy analysis that comes with it. Is as quick as anywhere in the industry. So thanks again, everyone. I hope you enjoy your Friday night, and we'll check back in with y'all later.